Hello and welcome to another What's for Dinner video where I share 3 meals that I made this week. These meals are all easy, delicious, and really quick to put together, so they are perfect for weeknight dinners. I started off the week with this garlic butter chicken with zucchini and corn. This is a recipe that I found on Pinterest and I kind of loosely followed the recipe, but I definitely made some tweaks here and there. Some of the comments did say that there wasn't enough seasoning on the chicken, so I decided to add some extra seasoning. I added some lemon pepper, paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, and some chili powder and some pepper, and I didn't use any of the exact measurements. I kind of just eyeballed everything until the chicken looked really well seasoned. And after I seasoned one side, I flipped chicken over onto the other side and seasoned it the exact same way, and then took my hand and kind of patted in the seasonings to make sure that it was mostly on the chicken and not on the cutting board. So over the last few years, I've been trying to get the hang of cooking on cast iron, and I don't know what it is, but I just can't seem to do it correctly. And I really want to learn, so I decided to bring my cast iron out again today. And here I am trying to cook the zucchini. So I placed the zucchini on the hot cast iron pan with a little bit of oil, and I let it cook for a couple of minutes to get that nice browning on it. And then after a couple of minutes, I flipped it over, and as you can see here, some of these pieces are really looking very nice and brown. Others are not looking as good. So I was trying to move the pieces around, making sure that each piece was nice and crispy. And in the end, it worked out okay, but I think that I didn't preheat my cast iron long enough. But if you have any tips, please let me know. So once the zucchini was done, I removed it from the pan and then added my chicken, and there was still enough oil on here, so I went ahead and just added the chicken with the oil that was still on the pan. I cooked the chicken for about 4 to 5 minutes on each side until it was fully cooked through. This recipe did call for chicken breast, but I decided to use chicken thighs because I wanted the chicken to be super juicy, and chicken breasts tend to overcook pretty quickly. So I'm using chicken thighs, and I highly recommend using chicken thighs if you do try this. And I recommend you try this because this meal is actually really, really good. And I'm going to link the recipe in the description box below. So after the chicken was fully cooked, I went ahead and added some pieces of butter in here, probably like a tablespoon total. And then I added a few cloves of minced garlic and then a really big squeeze of lemon, and I mixed everything together until the butter was melted. The garlic was cooked and everything was very nice and combined and super juicy. Then I scooted all of the chicken over to one side and added the zucchini onto the other side. And I kind of tossed it in some of that butter, and I also added some corn. I wish I would have used fresh corn, but canned corn is just so much easier to work with. And I also wish that I would have cooked the corn separately to get some charring on the corn, but it's okay, this turned out good. I also added some salt, a little bit of butter, and mixed that around until the butter melted. I topped this with some fresh parsley for some color, and then also shredded some Parmesan cheese over the top. Both of those things I decided to add at last minute, and they were so good. So again, I highly recommend that. This meal was really, really good, probably our favorite in this whole video. I served this with a side of couscous, which I forgot to show here, but it was just perfect. This next meal was also super good. I know I just said the other one was my favorite, but I think this one might have been my favorite. They were both delicious. I decided to make some crock pot birria and serve it with burrito bowls. So this was my first time making birria in the crock pot, and I will link the recipe that I used. It was really, really good. I think that birria does obviously taste a lot better when you cook it the authentic way, like on the stove, but this way was a lot easier and still really good. So I mixed all of these chilies, some tomato, spices, and seared the meat on my stove, and then I added all of the sauce into the crock pot and then added some onion, covered it, and cooked it for a total of 4 hours on low. And while that was cooking, I started to work on the rest of my ingredients. So here I'm making some quick pico de gallo. I just added some onion, some tomato, jalapeno, cilantro, and some salt and lemon, and I use that little dice machine. I don't know what that's called, but it makes it really easy to put together salsas like this. So I put that in the fridge and let that cool down, and then once the meat was almost done, I started to work on my rice. So I'm making some Mexican rice today, and I do have a video going in detail on how I make this, which I probably need to remake at some point because I kind of made a mistake in there. But here I'm just toasting some rice, and then I'm going to make a really quick tomato sauce. So I'm adding some tomato, some onion, some garlic, and blending that with a little bit of water. And then once the rice is this really nice golden yellow color, I added my tomato sauce and cooked that down a bit. In the meantime, I refilled that blender with 2 cups of water. I put it right in the blender to get that extra tomato out of there. And then once I cooked the sauce down for about 30 seconds or so, I went ahead and added those 2 cups of water. I also seasoned this to taste with some chicken bouillon powder and mixed that all together, waited for it to come to a boil, and then reduced it down to a very low simmer. I covered the pan and then let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes or until all the water is absorbed. Then turn the stove off, let it sit for another 5 minutes, and that's how you get this perfect rice. I also wanted some beans in my burrito bowl, and I was already cooking the birria, the rice, the salsas. I didn't want to cook the beans from scratch today, so I decided to use some canned beans, and I like to kind of spice my beans up when I do use canned beans. So here I added some oil and then some onion, which I burned because the pan was way too hot, but it's okay. And then I added some garlic and the beans, and I seasoned the beans with a little bit of cumin, black pepper, oregano, a bay leaf, and some chopped chipotle peppers, and I had this simmer on the stove for about 5 to 10 minutes. So now I'm starting to build my bowl. I'm adding a good amount of rice and some of the black beans. I also shredded some lettuce, so I'll be adding some lettuce. And I forgot to show this, but I also made some guac with that pico de gallo that I made earlier. I smashed some avocado, added some of that pico de gallo, and then just added some more lemon and salt to taste. And oh, here I'm adding the birria. So once the beef was done, I took it out of the crock pot, I shredded it, and then added it back into the broth, and that's what I served here. So here I'm adding the pico de gallo and then that guac that I put together with the pico de gallo, and I'm adding some green salsa, and then I also shredded some mozzarella cheese on top, and this was so good. The last meal for this video is chicken lo mein. I absolutely love chicken lo mein, and there's another recipe that I typically use, but I decided to try something new for this video, and I'll link the recipe that I use. So I'm adding some salt, baking soda and pepper to this chicken. I'm also adding some Shaoxing cooking wine. I've never used this ingredient before, but now I have a whole bottle, so if you know how I can use it up, please let me know. I added all of that and then gave the chicken a good mix and then set it aside. Oh, and I also forgot to add some garlic and some grated ginger, so I just went ahead and added it now, and then I continued to mix that until everything was really well and combined. Once the chicken was mixed, I set it aside to marinate for a few minutes, and in the meantime, I put together a sauce. For the sauce, I pretty much just followed the recipe exactly. So I'm adding some soy sauce, some dark soy sauce, some Shaoxing cooking wine, oyster sauce, and peanut butter. The peanut butter was new to me. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but you can't really taste the peanut butter in the noodles. So it was pretty good. I would do it again. I also added about a half cup of water and then mixed that together really well. For the peanut butter, it actually called for natural peanut butter, but all I had was this Skippy peanut butter because that's my favorite brand of peanut butter. So I just went ahead and used that, and it was okay. I don't really know if using natural peanut butter would have made a difference, but the Skippy brand turned out fine. I don't think the recipe called for it, but I also added some minced garlic to it because I love adding garlic to everything. I mixed that up and tried to break up some of that peanut butter, and at least did the best that I could. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay. Next, I started to cook the chicken. So I added some oil to this pan and then added the chicken. I kind of spread it out so that it was in a single layer, and I let it cook on one side for about 3 minutes to have it get like a nice brown crust. And then I flipped it over onto the other side. Eventually, I was just kind of stirring it, making sure that it didn't burn and every side cooked evenly. And after it was fully cooked, I removed the chicken from the stove, put it onto a separate plate, and began to cook my vegetables. So I started by cooking the vegetables that would take longest to cook. So that was my carrot and my broccoli, and I'm just using whatever vegetables I had in the fridge and I needed to use up. So I'm using some carrots, some broccoli, and then once that's cooked, I will add the rest of my vegetables. In the meantime, I was boiling a pot of water for the noodles, and the noodles take about 10 minutes to cook, so this is when I decided to add them. And I forgot to show the noodles that I used, but they're in that picture there. And I gave them a quick stir, let them cook for about 10 minutes, and then once they were done, I drained them in the sink and ran some cold water over the noodles for a couple of minutes, just following the package instructions. So here the broccoli and the carrots are mostly softened. I'm adding a little bit more oil in here because this was looking a little bit dry. And then I added some red bell pepper, some celery, and my scallions. And I'm just going to cook that down until the vegetables have softened. And I wasn't able to get the clip here, but at this point I added the chicken back into the pan to make sure that everything was very warm. And then I added the noodles right into the pan and topped that with the sauce that I prepared earlier. Then I mixed that all together until all of the noodles were coated in the sauce. And I gave it a taste and something wasn't quite right to me. I think I needed a little bit more oyster sauce, so I went ahead and added some more oyster sauce, gave that another stir, and at this point it was perfect. I went ahead and added my scallion greens and then of course mixed that in there as well. And that was it. I went ahead and served this with some sriracha on top and this was really good. I can't decide whether I like this recipe or the other recipe that I followed in the past, so I'll definitely have to try the other one and I will let you know. Thanks for watching this video and I'll see you on the next one.